There is a Native American plant, often called a potato, that has about 3 times the protein of the common potato. It grows on a vine. It fixes its own nitrogen like a bean. For centuries, people in North America treated it as a serious food. Then, in the modern age of supermarkets and diet trends, it almost vanished from our plates, not because it was poisonous, not because it tasted bad, because the food system quietly moved on. Once you see why, you will never look at forgotten foods the same way again. This plant is called American groundnut. Some people call it hopniss. It is not a peanut. It is not a true nut. It is a native tuber, like a string of little potatoes underground, and it belongs to the same big family as peas and beans. It once mattered to many indigenous communities across the eastern half of North America. It even helped early European settlers survive when stored food ran low. So here's the question that should bother you. If a hardy, local, protein-rich tuber already existed here, why did America build a food system that ignores it? To answer that, we have to start with something simple. This was never a mystery plant. It was seen, it was named, it was written down. In the 1700s, a Swedish scientist named Peter Kalm traveled in North America and recorded an indigenous name for it, hopniss, and he noted the underground tubers were eaten like potatoes. That matters because it kills the easy excuse. This was not a modern trend. This was not a gimmick. This was part of real-life food knowledge. And the plant itself has a strange design. It is a climbing vine that loves wet edges, stream banks, bottomlands, places you might walk past and never notice. Underground, it forms tubers along a rhizome like beads on a string. That is great for survival. If one piece breaks off, it can grow again. But it also creates the first hidden problem. Harvesting it is not like pulling one big potato. You are often digging for a chain of tubers. In an industrial system, harvesting difficulty can be the difference between a valuable crop and not worth it. Now we hit the first big turn. American groundnut did not disappear because people forgot it existed. It disappeared because the rules of farming and food changed. In the 1800s and the 1900s, America leaned hard into crops that fit machines, storage, and long-distance shipping. Potatoes, corn, wheat, then soy. Those crops have a simple promise. You plant, you harvest on schedule, you can process them in bulk, you can store them, you can ship them, and you can trade them like a commodity. American groundnut does not play that game easily. It can take time to build a good tuber crop. The tubers can be different sizes, and the plant's genetics are messy in a way that matters. In the wild, there are plants with different chromosome sets. Some can make seeds, some can barely make any. That sounds like a small detail. It is not. Because the moment you want to commercialize a crop, seed becomes everything. Here's the part most people miss. Many wild groundnut plants are triploid. Triploid plants can grow and flower, but they do not make viable seed. That means you cannot just sell a bag of seed to farmers at scale and expect uniform results. You have to propagate by tubers, planting pieces of tuber. That is slower. It is heavier to ship, it is harder to standardize, and it does not fit the modern seed industry model. That model wants seed that is predictable, easy to package, and easy to buy again next season. So by the time the 20th century rolled on, American groundnut got labeled in a quiet way. Not officially, not with a ban, just with a cultural shrug. It became known as a wild food, or as a weed. In some places, farmers even sprayed it because it tangled in crops. And once a plant gets that label, it stops being researched as a staple. and it starts being treated as a nuisance. But then something happened that should have brought it back. In the late 1980s, researchers, including teams connected to Louisiana State University, tried to do something ambitious. They treated American groundnut like a potential new crop. They wanted bigger tubers, better yields, and more consistency. They collected wild material and worked on breeding lines. The goal was simple: take a native, edible, nitrogen-fixing tuber and make it market-ready. That sounds like the start of a comeback story, and for a moment it was. Because when scientists work with a plant like this, they often find promise fast. If you can select for larger tubers and you can stabilize traits, you can create a new niche crop. Something like a protein potato that is native and perennial. And you can imagine the headlines: more protein, local, lower fertilizer needs. A crop that feels like it was made for a future of expensive inputs. But here is the twist. Even when the science moved, the system still did not, and this is where the groundnut story starts to rhyme with a lot of lost crops. It is not enough for something to be nutritious. It has to be profitable in the right way. It has to move through the processing world. It has to match equipment. It has to fit distribution. And it has to have a clean story that consumers instantly understand. American groundnut fails that last part too, because the name groundnut confuses people. Some think it is a peanut, some think it is a nut, some think it is a potato. And in a grocery aisle, confusion kills sales. A store does not want to explain a food for 30 seconds to every shopper. Then there is the deeper issue. Many of the biggest crops in America are supported by an entire machine around them. Subsidies, commodity markets, processing plants, storage infrastructure, equipment built for one crop. If you are a farmer, switching is not just a choice, it is a gamble against your whole setup. So the breeding work did not become a national rollout, it did not become a new aisle in supermarkets. Instead, it became something smaller. A few improved lines, a few specialty growers, a few foragers, a few seed and plant nerds who trade tubers like rare coins. And if that were the whole story, it would just be sad. But it gets more strange. Because the only place where American groundnut is grown in meaningful commercial amounts today is not the United States. It is Japan, in particular regions where it became a local specialty more than a century ago. Think about that. It is a plant native to the eastern half of North America, ignored at home but adopted abroad. So why did Japan find room for it while America did not? Part of the answer is scale and expectation. Japan has a culture of regional specialty foods. It is normal to value a crop because it is local, seasonal, and different. In the United States, our food system was built to do the opposite. It values uniformity, it values volume, it values shelf life, it values cheap calories that travel. And that leads to the real conflict in this story. The groundnut is not just a plant, it is a challenge to how we define a real crop. It asks a dangerous question. What if the best foods for a region are not the ones that dominate national markets? What if some foods are better when they stay small, local, and perennial? Because this plant has one more trick. It is a legume. That means it can work with bacteria in the soil to capture nitrogen from the air. In plain English, it can help feed itself. In a world where fertilizer is expensive, and where nitrogen runoff is a major water problem, that is not a cute detail. That is leverage. Now we enter the consequences. When a crop does not fit the modern system, it loses more than market share. It loses research dollars. It loses recipes. It loses processing knowledge. It loses a place in memory. And that loss becomes self-reinforcing. The fewer people who eat it, the fewer people who demand it. The fewer people who demand it, the fewer farmers who grow it. The fewer farmers who grow it, the less anyone invests in making it easier to harvest, easier to cook, and easier to sell. So why did it disappear? It is not one villain, it is a pileup of incentives. Harvesting a chain of tubers is harder than harvesting a uniform potato. Triploid genetics make seed-based scaling difficult. Names confuse consumers. Processing plants do not exist. Restaurants do not know what to do with it. Farmers are locked into equipment and contracts for other crops. But here is the part that should make you lean closer. None of that means the groundnut is a bad crop. It exposes a weakness in our system. Our system is good at producing a few big commodities. It is not good at protecting many regional staples. And now, in the 21st century, that weakness is starting to matter again, because weather is less predictable. Inputs cost more. Many gardeners and small farmers are looking for perennials that do not need constant replanting. People are looking for foods that feel like insurance. That is exactly what American groundnut used to be. So what would it take to bring it back? It would take something we do not talk about enough. It would take a different definition of success. Not whether it can become the next potato, but whether it can become a dependable local food again. It would take breeding work focused on harvestable tubers and consistent quality. It would take clear naming and clear cooking ideas. It would take a market that values regional crops, not just global commodities. And here is one last surprising detail, the kind that makes this whole story feel like a secret hiding in plain sight. American groundnut did not vanish from the land. It vanished from attention. It is still out there, climbing along creeks and forest edges. It is still in conservation gardens. It is still in the hands of small growers. It is still being studied in modern genetics work, because scientists see the same promise Indigenous people saw long ago, a nourishing tuber from a plant that can feed itself. So maybe the real question is not why it disappeared. Maybe the real question is what kind of food system makes us forget our own native staples. Because once you know this plant exists, you start seeing the pattern everywhere. The lost crops, the lost flavors, the lost local insurance policies our grandparents might have recognized. American groundnut is not a miracle. It is something more unsettling. It is proof that we had options. We still do. If you found this fascinating, hit subscribe for more stories like this. Tell me in the comments, would you try hopniss, a Native American tuber that eats like a potato but grows like a bean?